welcome to my channel. My name is Willow Rose Moondancer, and I make videos here on YouTube. I wanted to apologize for how little I've been on YouTube for the last 2 weeks because it's been a total zero amount. I have been really sick, and I think I'm pretty much completely over it as of right now. But I kind of wanted to talk to you about it because I know that COVID-19 is a really big deal right now, and I have a little story time about it for you about me. So this is going to be a story about Canada. It's going to be a story about the Maritimes. It's going to be a story about stress and being sick and all the things that embody the conversation around COVID-19. So we're going to start at a few weeks ago. So it would have been end of February, beginning of March. And there was no cases in my province. Or in any of the Maritimes, I believe, at that point, which is like the east coast of Canada. And so I wasn't too worried about it yet. It had just started trickling into Canada. It wasn't too crazy. I was getting a little bit nervous, but no big deal. Then March break came. And I, if you don't know, am a preschool teacher. And so a whole bunch of kids went on vacation to places like Mexico and Florida and Dominican and other various places in the States and all that good stuff. And when they got back, they were allowed to come back, despite whether or not they had been in a place that had cases. And then just a few days after March break was over, it was said by the government that if you got back before March 9th, I believe it was, then you could go to school, you can go to daycare, you could go to work, whatever. But if you got back after that time, then you had to stay home. And so pretty much all of the families at my daycare said that they got back before then. Whether or not that was true was a whole different story, and I could not tell you. But we have to take the words of our parents, and so we did. And so we were open for the whole week after March break. And during that time, I noticed that I started getting a stuffy nose and a runny nose and a little bit of a cough in the mornings. And this isn't totally weird for me. I'm a very, not to be gross, but I'm a very mucusy person. And so I just assumed, spring is coming, my allergies are just acting up. But I did notice that pretty much all the kids in my class had a really terrible cough. And I had 4 kids who went on vacation and 3 came back. 1 decided to self-isolate even though it wasn't mandatory, which I really appreciated. But the other 3 came. And they didn't have any crazy signs, just that they had the same cough that every other kid in our daycare pretty much had. And I was starting to develop it too. By that Friday, I had a pretty bad cough, but there was no other symptoms. I didn't even have a runny or a stuffy nose anymore. It was literally just this cough. It wasn't hurting my throat. It wasn't taking a lot of energy to get my coughs out. I was just coughing a lot. And so I didn't think much of it. It wasn't isolation time yet. Like, you were still allowed to go hang out with your friends. So it was Friday night. Every Friday I hang out with the same people just so we can stay in touch and hang out. And that was it. And then the next morning, I woke up and I felt terrible. I had this cough, and this cough was so intense that I didn't physically have the energy or the ability to breathe in enough air to get the full cough out. Because along with this cough, I started to notice that I was short of breath. It wasn't a crazy amount, but like if I talked really fast, I would have to slow down and consciously take deep breaths. If I walked to the bathroom, I would have to do the same thing and catch my breath. Walking would also cause coughing fits where I would have to like crouch into a ball and like squeeze my abs super hard to be able to push out my coughs. And I had chills. That evening, I ended up getting a very, very teeny temperature of 100, but regardless, it was a temperature, and I started getting worried, especially with the shortness of breath. And since I had just had a week where all of the kids from daycare had come back from vacationing. And so I called 811 on Sunday. I started trying to contact them at 11. I was on hold for like 2.5 hours, and for some reason my call dropped. And so at the 1 hour mark of being on hold, I had the option of leaving a voice message and them calling me back. And the first time, I prefer to just stay on the line because then I know I'm waiting, I'm expecting for them to call me. I don't like leaving a message and hanging up because then I just feel like I'm waiting my whole day for a call. I'm weird. But by the second time, I was like, I'm not waiting 2.5 hours just for my call to drop again. So I waited the hour, and when they finally gave me the option to leave a message, I did that and I hung up. And they called me not long after, like not longer than an hour. And I told them all my symptoms, and they kept asking me these questions, and I kept saying no to them. So I felt like, oh, I'm overreacting. I'm fine. They're just going to tell me to stay home and isolate just to be safe or something like that. But instead, they were like, okay, can you go to the hospital like right now? And I was like, I can in a few minutes. Like, I hadn't gotten dressed yet. My hair was a mess. Like, I spent the whole day, the last 2 days in bed doing nothing. So that's how I looked and how I was dressed. And so she's like, okay, well, you need to get there in the next hour. I'm going to fax your information over. Go to the ER. And so I did. I got dressed. My partners, they got dressed, and they took me to the ER. They were ready there to wait with me. And when we got there, we were greeted at the door, and we were asked why we were here, and I told them what happened. And they immediately got me to wash my hands, put a mask on my face, and told my partners that they could not come with me. And if they wanted to, they could wait in the main room, but that I had to be brought into a separate spot that was completely sealed and quarantined off from the rest of the hospital. And at that point, I'm like, there's no point in you guys just staying here to be in another room. Like, just go home. If something happens, I'll let you know. I wasn't too worried about it because I knew that even if I got it, I was going to be okay. I was getting checked because I needed to know if I could go to work or not, and because I didn't want to infect those families, assuming that they weren't already infected if I had gotten it from the daycare. And so I got in there, I went through triage where they pretty much asked me all the same questions that the lady on the phone asked me when I called 811. The only extra things they did was they took my blood pressure and my pulse, I'm sure it was, and just a couple small things like that. And then I just went and sat in a room with a few other people, I think at any given point, there wasn't any more than 6 or 8 of us. And we were all wearing masks, sitting away from each other in a room that was like a vacuum sealed shut. There was only 2 nurses in this, what they called the COVID center, or is that what they called it? COVID corner, they called it. COVID corner. Nobody else was allowed to come in. And yeah, I just sat there and waited and waited and waited. We were waiting for a doctor. So there was a few points where the doctor like would call on the phone and just based off of the symptoms, say test them or send them home. And so they did that with like, there was an older couple who did get swabbed and sent home. And then there was another man who didn't get swabbed, he just got sent home. And then later on, there was a man who came in, didn't even get triaged, just immediately went and got swabbed. I think he was a doctor, but I wasn't sure. And so eventually, the nurse got fed up of waiting and went out and fetched the doctor, which I very much appreciated. And I got called in, and I heard before I got called in while I was waiting that it was a shame that they were telling people that if you have any symptoms to call 811, because they were only testing people at this point who had traveled or who had been around people who traveled who had very obvious symptoms or had already been a confirmed case. And so I was someone who had been around people who traveled, but no confirmed cases, and other than a cough, no symptoms from anyone around me. So they did not end up testing me. They gave me a prescription for a puffer because I was wheezy, like I was having a hard time breathing. Every time the doctor would tell me to take a deep breath in and I would breathe it out, it would just be wheezing. And so they gave me a puffer and just sent me home, told me not to go to work until my cough stopped so I wouldn't be scaring people. And that was that. And so I didn't go into work on Monday because I still was very, very sick. I couldn't even really move much without having a coughing fit. And then when the end of Monday came around, the daycares were all closed by the government. And they've been closed since. So this is the end, as I'm recording this on Sunday, the 29th of March. This would be the second week of isolation. And no foreseeable end date. It's currently indefinite. I'm sure we'll be like this for at least a month more, if not longer. But yeah. And I'm doing a lot better now. They never told me if I did or didn't have it. I was told, you have a virus. We're not testing you for COVID-19. Here's a puffer. So I didn't even go and get the prescription myself. My partner went out and got my prescription. Neither of my partners, because if you don't know, I am in a poly relationship. They're both living here. We're all in the same house. Neither of them have had any symptoms. So they've been kind of running very little errands as possible. So they've been the ones going to the grocery store. I haven't really left the house other than to take a walk up and down my street for 2 weeks. And yeah. That's been my story. I've heard that they are making the test more accessible now, even if you haven't traveled outside of the country. But at this point, I'm feeling better. Like, I wouldn't bother to try and get the test again. But yeah, I'd love to hear your stories on what isolation has been like for you, what you've been up to. At some point, I'm probably gonna do a video about things to help you stay occupied during this time. And things are getting pretty serious with one of my partners. Things have been serious with my other one for 7 years. But my new partner, things are starting to get more serious, and I would like to do a little video about her if you guys are interested in that, and kind of like how our dynamic is working and all that jazz. So if that's something you'd be interested in, make sure you leave a like or a comment down below. And I'll do that in the next week or two. But yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you check out my Instagram at Willow Rose Moon Dancer so you can stay up to date with me and my everyday life. Like I said, make sure you leave a like down below. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe, as I make videos every Tuesday, every Thursday, and every Sunday. But just so you know, I'm only uploading on Tuesday and Sunday today, just so I can get back into the groove of things. And then next week we'll be doing our normal 3 days every week. And until next time, blessed be.